Welcome to Myth and Moonlight, where stories carry you to the land of peaceful sleep. I'm your guide, Aaron, and I will take you on tonight's journey. Home is something we all seek in one form or another, whether it's a physical place with four walls and a roof, or that feeling of belonging that blooms within when we find our true purpose. I've often found myself wondering what home truly means. Is it where we were born, where we live now, or is it something more? A feeling that transcends location, a sense of rightness within ourselves. Tonight we'll follow a gentle soul on a quest for that very feeling. We'll wander through forests where the trees whisper ancient secrets, pause by streams that carry stories in their currents, and visit meadows where time seems to stand perfectly still. Our journey will take us through a world where magic lives in the smallest details, where wisdom can be found in unexpected places, and where the meaning of home might be something entirely different than what we initially believe. There's a profound truth that many discover only after a long journey, that sometimes what we seek has been with us all along. We simply needed the journey to help us see it. Tonight's story embraces this gentle wisdom, inviting us to consider what home truly means to each of us, beyond the physical structures that shelter us. As we begin, I invite you to find a comfortable position wherever you are. Allow your body to be fully supported, knowing that for the next while, you have nowhere else to be and nothing else to do but rest and listen. Let this be a time of complete ease, where your only task is to breathe and follow along as our story unfolds. Take a moment now to settle in. Feel the weight of your body being supported. Notice how with each breath, you can invite a little more comfort, a little more ease into your experience. Our journey tonight begins not in some far-off land, but right here, in this moment of openness and receptivity. Many of us understand what it feels like to search for something that seems just beyond our reach, that sense of yearning for a place where we truly belong, where everything clicks into place, and we can finally exhale fully, knowing we're exactly where we're meant to be. Sometimes we search for years, looking outward for that perfect situation or location, only to discover that the feeling of home was something we carried within us all along. This universal experience of seeking belonging connects us all, from the smallest child building a blanket fort to call their own, to elders reflecting on a lifetime of creating homes in various places. We all need that sanctuary, that place where we can be fully ourselves without pretense or guard. Tonight's journey honors that deep human need for belonging, for rootedness, for home. I'd like to begin by guiding you into a state of comfortable relaxation. Start by bringing awareness to the top of your head, noticing any tension you might be holding there. As you exhale, allow that tension to soften and release. Continue moving your attention downward to your forehead and eyebrows. Many of us carry tension here without realizing it. With the gentle attention, let those muscles smooth and relax. Move to your jaw, another common place we hold stress. Allow your teeth to slightly part, your tongue to rest comfortably in your mouth. Feel how releasing tension here creates a wave of relaxation that flows down your neck and into your shoulders. Speaking of shoulders, allow them to drop away from your ears, creating space and ease. Feel how your chest can expand more freely with each breath as your shoulders settle into a position of comfortable rest. From your shoulders, bring your awareness down your arms, through your elbows, wrists, and all the way to your fingertips. Allow any tension or tightness to melt away with each breath. Return your attention to your chest and notice how it gently rises and falls with your breathing. No need to change anything. Simply observe the natural rhythm of your breath. From your chest, bring awareness down through your abdomen, allowing it to soften and release with each exhale. Continue down through your hips, sensing how they're supported by the surface beneath you. Moving down your legs, release any holding or tension through your thighs, knees, calves, and all the way to your ankles and feet. Feel a pleasant heaviness developing throughout your body as you continue to let go. Notice how your feet might feel warm and heavy, how your legs become more and more relaxed with each breath. Now let's bring gentle awareness to your breathing pattern. Notice the cool sensation as air flows in through your nose, filling your lungs. Feel the subtle expansion of your rib cage and the slight rise of your abdomen. Then, observe the warmer sensation as you exhale, the air flowing out, carrying tension away with it. Without trying to control or change your breathing, simply allow it to find its own natural, comfortable rhythm. Perhaps you notice your inhales becoming deeper, your exhales becoming longer. Each breath creates a gentle wave of relaxation flowing through your entire body. Notice how your body responds to this attention, perhaps becoming heavier, warming from within. Your breathing might naturally slow, creating space between each breath. These spaces between breaths are peaceful moments of complete rest, like little islands of tranquility. With your next few breaths, imagine breathing in a sense of calm and breathing out any remaining tension or worry. Breathing in peace, breathing out stress, breathing in comfort, breathing out anything that doesn't serve you in this moment. Now, let's begin to create our visualization environment, a gentle foundation for our story to unfold upon. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a verdant meadow in a world unlike our own. The grass beneath your feet is a rich, deep green, with the tiny wildflowers dotting the landscape in the bursts of gentle purple, sunny yellow, and soft white. The meadow stretches before you, not endlessly, but to a comfortable distance where it meets a line of ancient trees. These trees stand tall and wise, their branches creating a welcoming canopy. Some have trunks so wide it would take 3 people joining hands to encircle them. Their bark ranges from silvery gray to rich amber, with intricate patterns that seem almost like writing if you look closely enough. The sky above is a serene shade of blue, painted with a few wispy clouds that drift lazily on a gentle breeze. The sunlight has that golden quality of late afternoon, casting everything in a warm, honeyed glow. This light seems to make every color more vibrant, while remaining soft and easy on your eyes. In the distance, beyond the trees, you can make out the gentle slope of rolling hills. Some are topped with interesting formations of rock that catch the light in ways that make them seem to shimmer slightly. And further still, the misty silhouette of mountains rises, their peaks occasionally catching the light in brief, diamond-like sparkles. Now, become aware of the sounds in this peaceful scene. The most immediate is the gentle rustle of grass and leaves as the breeze passes through them, a soft whispering sound that ebbs and flows like breathing. From somewhere not too far away comes the soothing gurgle of a brook, water playing over smooth stones in an ever-changing melody. Birdsong decorates the air, not the frantic chirping of early morning, but the contented occasional calls of afternoon. These sounds don't demand your attention, but rather create a gentle backdrop of natural music. From deep within the forest comes the occasional soft hooting of an owl, though it's still daylight. Perhaps in this world, owls don't wait for darkness to share their gentle wisdom. The air around you carries the rhythmic buzzing of bees moving unhurriedly from flower to flower. This sound rises and falls as they come near, and then move away again, never intrusive, just a reminder of the busy life that thrives all around. Settle deeper into this environment by noticing how your body feels within it. The temperature is perfect, not too warm, not too cool, as though the air itself knows exactly what you need for comfort. The breeze is just enough to prevent any feeling of stillness without being strong enough to chill or disturb. The ground beneath you offers the perfect balance of support and yielding softness. Each step you might take sinks just slightly into the cushioned earth, creating a gentle embrace for your feet. There's a pleasant sense of being both light and grounded simultaneously, as though gravity here is gentler, more considerate of your comfort. The sunlight feels like a warm blanket on your skin, penetrating just deeply enough to release any lingering tension in your muscles. There's a gentle tingling sensation of energy and vitality that seems to pass from the earth itself up through the soles of your feet and throughout your entire body. As you breathe deeply, notice the scents that fill this mystical world. The primary note is of fresh grass and wildflowers, a sweet green smell that somehow communicates both vibrance and peace. Mingled with this is the earthy richness of soil and the slightly tangy scent of the nearby forest with its mosses, mushrooms, and ancient bark. When the breeze shifts just so, you might catch the clean, bright scent of water from the brook, carrying with it hints of smooth stones and sweet reeds. Occasionally, there's the subtle sweetness of ripe berries growing somewhere nearby, their fruity aroma mingling with hints of sun-warmed honey. If you were to taste the air, it would have that indescribable freshness that sometimes comes after a light rain, a crispness that feels cleansing and invigorating. There's a subtle sweetness, too, as though the nectar from the wildflowers has somehow infused the very atmosphere. As we stand at the threshold of our story, let's consider what this journey toward home might mean. Home is not merely a destination, but a recognition, a feeling of alignment when our outer circumstances reflect our inner truth. Sometimes we must wander far to discover what we truly seek was available to us all along. If only we had the eyes to see it, the wisdom to recognize it. The search for home is ultimately a search for belonging, for the place or state of being where we are most authentically ourselves. It's where our gifts can flow freely and where we find both purpose and rest in equal measure. This journey our character undertakes mirrors our own quest to find where and how we truly belong in this world. Know that wherever you are in your own journey, you are exactly where you need to be right now. You have permission to rest completely as our story unfolds. It's okay to drift in and out of conscious awareness. Your deeper mind will still receive what it needs. Allow yourself the gift of complete relaxation. You can let go of any need to remember or analyze what you hear. You're free to simply experience and enjoy. And now, as we transition into our main story, allow yourself to settle even deeper into comfort, to become even heavier and more relaxed, as we meet a very special inhabitant of this mystical world. In a gentle valley nestled between ancient hills lay the village of Hushwater Dell, home to a community of hobbits who lived in cozy holes burrowed into the hillsides. These were not the dark, damp holes you might imagine, but comfortable dwellings with round doors, polished wooden floors, and walls lined with well-stocked pantries and bookshelves. Among these hobbits lived Berry Bramblewood, though most called him Berry for short. Berry was somewhat ordinary by hobbit standards, which is to say he was about 3.5 feet tall, with curly chestnut hair that had a mind of its own, especially on humid mornings. His eyes were a thoughtful hazel that changed with his moods, more green when he was curious, more brown when he was contemplative. Like most hobbits, his feet were covered with a layer of curly hair, making shoes unnecessary even on chilly days. Berry lived in a modest hobbit hole on the eastern edge of the village, slightly apart from the others. His round blue door faced the rising sun, and his kitchen window offered a view of the distant Whisperwood forest, while other hobbit holes boasted elaborate gardens with prize-winning vegetables and flowers. Berry's garden was a bit wild and untamed. Wildflowers grew wherever they pleased among his carrots and potatoes, and the stone path to his door wandered rather than proceeding directly, as if it too enjoyed taking the scenic route. Inside, Berry's home was a reflection of his somewhat unusual nature. Where most hobbits displayed family heirlooms and keepsakes, Berry's shelves held curious items he'd collected on his walks. Interestingly shaped stones, abandoned bird feathers, and pieces of wood worn into fascinating shapes by the river. His walls were adorned not with portraits of stern-looking hobbit ancestors, but with his own charcoal sketches of landscapes, trees, and the night sky. Berry had lived in Hushwater Dell all his 42 years. But unlike most hobbits who could trace their family's residence back many generations, Berry's parents had arrived from somewhere else just before his birth. They had passed away when he was still young, leaving him with the Hobbit Hole, a book of unusual stories and many unanswered questions about where they had come from and why they had left. Perhaps it was this history that made Berry different from other hobbits in subtle ways. While they were content to stay within the boundaries of the dell, Berry often felt a strange restlessness, a sense that there was something more waiting beyond the familiar hills. He couldn't name this feeling exactly. It wasn't quite discontent, but more like a persistent whisper he couldn't quite make out. Berry's daily pattern had a comfortable predictability to it. He would wake with the sun stretching slowly as golden light filtered through his east-facing bedroom window. The first sounds he heard each morning were the cheerful melodies of songbirds who nested in the old oak tree that partially shaded his hobbit hole. He would lie still for a few moments, listening to their songs and watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams. His breakfast was always unhurried. Berry would stand at his stove, bare feet appreciating the cool of the stone floor, as he prepared a simple meal, perhaps porridge with honey and berries in spring and summer, or a heartier grain with dried fruits and nuts during the cooler months. He always brewed a pot of herbal tea, using plants he gathered himself from the meadows and forest edge. After breakfast, while other hobbits busied themselves with village matters, Berry would often sit in his doorway, sketchbook in hand, capturing the way the morning light played on the distant hills, or how the wildflowers in his garden nodded in the breeze. He had filled dozens of these books over the years, each page a window into a moment that had caught his attention. The temperament that set Berry apart was not immediately obvious. He was friendly enough when he visited the village for supplies, exchanging pleasant greetings and engaging in the expected small talk about weather and crops. But observant hobbits might notice how his attention would drift to the horizon during conversations, or how he would pause to listen to sounds others didn't seem to notice. The distinctive call of a particular bird, or the subtle change in the rustle of leaves that signaled a shift in the wind. Most evenings after a simple dinner, Berry would sit before his small fireplace and read from his parents' book of stories. The tales were unlike the practical histories that most Hobbit families passed down. These were stories of far-off lands with strange customs, of travelers who discovered hidden realms by following seemingly insignificant signs, and of ordinary folk who found themselves on extraordinary journeys. As flames cast dancing shadows on his walls, Berry would often close the book and sit quietly, feeling that familiar something tugging at the edges of his awareness, that sense that there was more to discover, more to understand. It was during these contemplative evenings that he felt both most at home and most aware that something about his home was not quite complete. 3 times each day, Berry would practice a ritual his mother had taught him before she passed. He would stand still, close his eyes, and take 3 deep, intentional breaths. To remind yourself that you are here now, she had told him. No matter where your thoughts wander, your breath brings you home. As a child, Berry had found this practice boring. But as he grew older, these moments of stillness became anchors in his day. Brief pauses where the restless whisper would quiet, if only momentarily. Each night as Berry settled into his comfortable bed with its patchwork quilt, he would lie awake for a time, listening to the night sounds filtering through his slightly open window. The gentle hooting of owls, the rhythmic chirping of crickets, the occasional rustle of small creatures moving through his garden. These sounds were so familiar that they had become part of him, the lullaby that eventually carried him into sleep. Yet even in his dreams, Berry often found himself walking unfamiliar paths, searching for something he couldn't name but would recognize if he found it. He would wake from these dreams with a lingering feeling, not quite sadness, not quite longing, but something in between, a feeling that would stay with him as he moved through his day, like a melody heard once and half remembered. Hushwater Dell existed within a broader world of gentle magic and ancient mystery. The village itself was nestled in a verdant valley, surrounded by rolling hills that changed color with the seasons, bright green in spring, golden in summer, a patchwork of amber and crimson in autumn, and a soft silver white under winter snow. A clear stream called the Whispering Water curved around the eastern edge of the village, providing fresh water and occasionally offering up pretty stones that Hobbit children collected eagerly. Beyond the immediate surroundings of the dell lay the Whisperwood Forest to the east, a place most Hobbits regarded with a mixture of respect and caution. The trees there grew tall and close together, their canopy so thick in places that midday felt like dusk beneath them. Strange lights were sometimes seen moving among the trees at night, and the oldest hobbits told stories of travelers who entered the wood and emerged days later claiming only hours had passed. To the north rose the Mistpeak Mountains, their highest summits perpetually shrouded in clouds. On rare, perfectly clear days, Barry could just make out what appeared to be structures near one of the peaks, too regular to be natural formations, yet surely too remote for habitation. No hobbit had ever journeyed there in living memory. South of the dell stretched the wide plains, where the grass grew tall and moved in waves when the wind blew. Traders occasionally came from distant settlements across these plains, bringing exotic goods and news of the wider world. Their arrival was always a cause for excitement in the village, and Barry made a point of speaking with them, hungry for tales of places beyond his experience. The hobbits of Hushwater Dell lived by the rhythms of nature and tradition. They marked time by the phases of the moon and the turning of seasons, rather than by clocks and calendars. Important events were planned around natural phenomena: harvest festivals under the full moon, spring planting when certain flowers bloomed, winter feasts when the first snow fell. There was a gentle magic in this world, not the showy kind found in Barry's storybook, but a subtle enchantment that revealed itself to those who paid attention. Water drawn from certain springs seemed to help gardens flourish beyond explanation. Words spoken at twilight sometimes carried further than they should. Dreams on midsummer nights often contained messages or insights that proved useful in waking life. The cultural context of Hushwater Dell valued comfort, predictability, and community. Hobbits took pride in maintaining traditions and in knowing exactly who they were and where they belonged. They celebrated the changing seasons with feasts and music, shared work like harvesting and barn raising, and gathered regularly to exchange news and stories. The highest compliment one could receive was to be called dependable, and the worst criticism was to be considered flighty or unpredictable. Barry moved through this world with an appreciation for its beauty and an awareness of its patterns, yet always with that underlying sense that he was somehow seeing it differently than others did. When other hobbits remarked on the practical uses of plants, Barry noticed their intricate structures and varied colors. When others discussed the weather in terms of how it would affect crops, Barry found himself wondering where the clouds had come from and where they were going. In the mornings, Barry particularly loved watching the mist that formed over the meadows, how it swirled in complex patterns before the sun's warmth dissipated it. He would often pause his breakfast preparation to stand at his window, observing how the golden sunlight filtered through the mist, creating an ethereal landscape that existed for mere moments before transforming. During his walks, he would sometimes lie on his back in a meadow, feeling the earth solid and supportive beneath him, watching the intricate dance of insects among the grass stems and flowers. The contrast between the vast sky above and the tiny, detailed world at grass level never ceased to fascinate him. In these moments of stillness and observation, the persistent whisper of something missing would quiet, replaced by a deep appreciation for exactly where and when he was. When rainfall kept him indoors, Barry found comfort in the rhythmic patter on his roof and the earthy scent that rose from his garden as the drops met soil. He would sit by his window with a steaming mug of tea, sketching the way raindrops clung to leaves before growing too heavy and falling, or how puddles formed intricate patterns as drops landed in them. In the evenings, Barry often sat outside his door to watch the sunset paint the western sky in dramatic hues. He noted how the quality of light changed, casting longer shadows and giving familiar objects new dimensions. As darkness fell, he would remain, watching stars appear one by one, until the night sky was a vast tapestry of twinkling lights. On clear nights, He sometimes slept outside, wrapped in blankets, falling asleep to the cosmic display above and the gentle symphony of night sounds around him. The changing seasons brought different sensory delights. Spring filled the air with the sweet scent of blossoms and new growth. Summer brought the rich aroma of sun-warmed earth and the pleasant weight of humid air. Autumn carried the spicy scent of fallen leaves and the crisp clarity of cooling air. Winter offered the clean smell of snow and the particular silence that fell with it, a hush that made even familiar sounds seem new. Barry found joy in these simple experiences, in the way sunlight felt warm on his skin after a cool morning, or how a perfectly ripe strawberry from his garden burst with flavor when bitten. He delighted in the cool relief of dipping his feet in the stream on hot summer days and the cozy warmth of sitting by his fire with a book as rain drummed steadily outside. Yet even in these moments of sensory appreciation and presence, that whisper would eventually return, the sense that there was something more, something he was meant to find or understand. It was as though all these experiences were pieces of a puzzle, beautiful in themselves, but also part of a larger picture he couldn't yet see. The rhythm of life in Hushwater Dell continued this way for Barry through the turning seasons, each day similar to the last, yet unique in its details, each night bringing dreams of paths not yet walked and places not yet seen. And then came the spring morning that would set in motion a journey he had perhaps been preparing for all his life without knowing it. The day began like any other. Barry woke with the sun, performed his morning breathing ritual, and prepared a simple breakfast as he sat in his doorway, enjoying the warm sunlight and the songs of birds. His attention was drawn to something unusual. A small, iridescent feather drifting on the breeze. The feather seemed to glow with an inner light, shifting from deep blue to purple to green as it tumbled through the air. Barry had seen many feathers in his life, but none quite like this one. He watched, captivated, as it danced on air currents, moving not entirely at random, but with a purpose that seemed impossible for something so light and at the mercy of the wind. Almost without thinking, Barry set aside his breakfast and stood, following the feather's path. It led him past his garden gate and toward the meadow that separated his home from the Whisperwood forest. Normally, he might have hesitated at the garden boundary, remembering the chores waiting for him. But today his curiosity overcame his routine. The feather continued its meandering yet purposeful journey, staying just ahead of Barry, sometimes seeming to wait when he fell too far behind. It led him across the meadow, through tall grass that brushed against his waist, past wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze. Barry noticed how the morning dew still clung to some blades of grass, creating tiny prisms that scattered light in rainbow patterns. As he walked, Barry became aware of a subtle shift in his perception. Colors seemed slightly brighter, sounds a bit clearer. The persistent whisper that had been his constant companion for as long as he could remember seemed to have transformed into a gentle humming, as though it was pleased with his decision to follow the feather. The feather led him to the very edge of the Whisperwood forest, hovering before the shadow of the trees. Barry paused, feeling the weight of a choice before him. Hobbits rarely entered the forest, and never alone, yet something about this moment felt significant, as though he stood on a threshold, not just between meadow and forest, but between the life he had known and something entirely new. As he stood contemplating, Barry noticed how his body felt. His heart beat a bit faster than usual, not from exertion but from a mixture of excitement and apprehension. His skin seemed more sensitive, registering the gentle touch of the breeze and the warmth of sunlight with heightened awareness. His breathing had deepened naturally, each inhale bringing the rich scent of wildflowers and meadow grass, each exhale releasing a little of his hesitation. Barry looked back at the distant figure of his hobbit hole, its round blue door a familiar sight that had greeted him every day of his life. Then he turned to the forest. With its mysteries and unknowns, the feather hovered patiently, its iridescent colors seeming to intensify as it caught the morning light. Taking a deep breath, inhaling courage, exhaling doubt, Barry stepped into the shadow of the trees, following the feather into the whisper wood. As he crossed this threshold, he felt a subtle shift, as though the forest itself acknowledged his choice and welcomed him. Inside the forest, the quality of light changed dramatically. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy in distinct beams, creating pools of golden brightness on the forest floor. The air felt different too, cooler, damper, filled with the rich scent of moss, mushrooms, and decomposing leaves. The sounds of the meadow faded, replaced by the gentle creaking of branches, the soft pattering of small creatures moving through underbrush, and the more distant calls of forest birds. Barry followed the feather along a narrow path that seemed to appear just as he needed it, winding between ancient trees whose trunks were wider than his hobbit hole. Some of these trees had faces, not carved by any hand, but formed naturally in the patterns of bark and knots. Barry couldn't decide if these faces were watching him, or if his imagination was simply finding patterns in the random textures. As he ventured deeper into the wood, Barry noticed small mushrooms growing along the path, their caps glowing with a faint blue luminescence even in daylight. Occasionally, tiny lights like fireflies would appear, hovering momentarily before darting away into the undergrowth. Time seemed to move differently here, stretching and compressing in ways that made it impossible to tell if he had been walking for minutes or hours. The feather led him to a small clearing where a shaft of sunlight illuminated a perfectly circular pool of water, so clear it was almost invisible. Here, the feather descended gently, landing on the surface of the pool without breaking the tension of the water. As it touched the surface, ripples spread outward in concentric circles, and the feather slowly dissolved into light that spread throughout the water, giving it a subtle glow. Barry approached the pool cautiously, kneeling at its edge. The forest around him had gone completely silent, as though holding its breath in anticipation. Looking into the water, Barry expected to see his reflection, but instead, he saw a series of images, places he had never been, people he had never met, all somehow familiar in a way he couldn't explain. As he continued to gaze into the pool, the images shifted and changed, eventually settling on a single scene. A hobbit hole, much like his own, but in a setting he didn't recognize, surrounded by trees unlike those in Hushwater Dell. The door of this hobbit hole was a rich, warm red, and somehow Barry knew with absolute certainty that this place was significant. Whether it was from his past or in his future, he couldn't tell, but the sight of it resonated deeply within him, intensifying that sense of something missing or something sought. When the image finally faded, returning to a simple reflection of his own surprised face, Barry sat back on his heels, processing what he had seen, His mind was filled with questions, but his heart felt lighter somehow, as though it had received an answer it had been waiting for, even if his conscious mind didn't yet understand. The clearing was silent no longer. Birds resumed their songs, insects their buzzing. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. It was as though that moment of vision had been outside of time, and now normal time had resumed. Berry noticed that the quality of light had changed. It was now the golden hue of late afternoon, though it had been early morning when he left his home. Standing, Berry realized he faced a choice: return to Hushwater Dell and his familiar life, or continue deeper into the Whisperwood, following the pull of what he had seen in the pool. The paths leading from the clearing were numerous, and he had no feather now to guide him. As he considered his options, Berry became aware of his body again, the solid ground beneath his feet, the cool forest air filling his lungs, the gentle warmth where sunlight touched his skin. He closed his eyes and performed his breathing ritual, 3 deep, intentional breaths, to bring him fully into the present moment. On the 3rd exhale, he opened his eyes and noticed something he hadn't seen before: a small, smooth stone near the edge of the pool, in the exact spot where he had knelt. The stone was unremarkable, except for a pattern on its surface that resembled the door he had seen in his vision. A simple arch with a circle at its center. Berry picked up the stone, feeling its weight and the surprising warmth it held, as though it had been sitting in sunlight rather than forest shadow. As his fingers closed around it, he felt a subtle directional pull, a gentle pressure urging him toward one of the many paths leading from the clearing. Understanding dawned gradually. The stone was a guide, responding to the vision he had been shown, offering to lead him toward that red door and whatever waited behind it. This realization brought with it both excitement and a flutter of anxiety. Following this path would mean leaving behind everything familiar, venturing into unknown territory with no certainty of what he would find, or even if he could return. Yet staying meant returning to that persistent whisper, that sense of incompleteness that had been his companion for so long. The choice, when framed this way, hardly seemed like a choice at all. Berry slipped the stone into his pocket, feeling its warmth against his thigh, and took his first step on the path it indicated, moving deeper into the Whisperwood and toward his first real adventure. As Berry followed the gentle pull of the stone, the forest around him began to change in subtle ways. The trees grew taller and further apart, allowing more light to filter through the canopy. The undergrowth became less dense, making his path easier to follow. The air carried new scents, hints of spice and something sweet he couldn't identify, mingled with the familiar forest smells of moss and earth. The path led him uphill, a gradual incline that eventually brought him to another clearing, this one larger than the first, and dominated by an enormous tree at its center. Unlike the other trees of the Whisperwood, this one had leaves of silver that caught the light and scattered it in dazzling patterns. Its trunk was pale, almost white, with intricate patterns that seemed to shift slightly when viewed from the corner of one's eye. As Berry approached this magnificent tree, he noticed a figure sitting at its base, the first person he had encountered since entering the forest. Drawing closer, he saw it was an elderly woman, small and slender like a hobbit, but with pointed ears that peeked through her long silver hair. She wore a simple robe of green, so deep it was almost black, adorned with the subtle embroidery that echoed the patterns on the tree trunk. The woman looked up as Berry approached, fixing him with eyes that were a startling violet color. Her face was lined with age, but radiated a vitality that suggested years were a poor measure of her true nature. She smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be entirely human. "Ah, the seeker arrives," she said, her voice like leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. "I wondered if you would heed the call." Berry stopped a respectful distance away, suddenly aware of his disheveled appearance and unprepared state. I followed a feather," he explained, feeling the inadequacy of his words even as he spoke them. The woman's smile deepened. "And now, a stone guides you. Tomorrow perhaps it will be a song or a scent on the wind. The form matters less than your willingness to follow." She patted the ground beside her. "Sit, Berry Bramblewood. Rest a while and share your story." Surprised to hear his name spoken by this stranger, Berry hesitated only briefly before sitting cross-legged on the surprisingly comfortable ground beside her. The earth beneath him felt warm and somehow nurturing, as though the soil itself welcomed his weight. "How do you know my name?" he asked, his curiosity overcoming his initial caution. "Names have power and presence in this world," she replied. "Yours has been whispering through the roots and branches for some time now, seeking connection." She tilted her head, studying him with those remarkable eyes. "But you haven't come to discuss the nature of names. You seek something, though. You may not yet know exactly what." Berry nodded, feeling a profound relief at being so easily understood. "There's this feeling I've had for as long as I can remember," he began, the words flowing more easily than he expected, "like something is missing or waiting to be found. Today it led me to follow a feather into the forest, and I saw." He paused, uncertain how to describe his vision. "You saw a glimpse of what could be," the woman supplied. "A door not yet opened, but waiting for your hand." "Yes," Berry agreed, surprised again by her insight. "A red door in a hillside, like my home, but not my home." The woman nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The vision you saw in the pool of echoes was no accident. It shows what the heart seeks before the mind understands." She reached out, placing a hand on his chest over his heart. Her touch was light but warm, spreading a pleasant tingling sensation through his body. "Your heart seeks home, not the home you've known, but the home you're meant to find." Berry frowned slightly. "But I have a home in Hushwater Dell. I've lived there all my life." "A dwelling is not always a home, just as existing is not always living," the woman said gently. "You've had shelter and comfort, yes, but your spirit has been seeking something more." She removed her hand, leaving a lingering warmth. "Tell me, in all your years in the dell, have you ever felt truly that you belonged there?" The question struck Berry with unexpected force. He had never framed his persistent restlessness in quite this way, but now that she asked, the answer was obvious. "No," he admitted quietly. "I've always felt different, as though I was hearing a different song than everyone else." The woman nodded, satisfied. "Because you are." She gestured at the stone visible in his pocket. "That guide stone has been waiting for centuries for the right hand to claim it. It doesn't lead just anyone to any place. It resonates with the specific journey that calls to your spirit." Berry took the stone from his pocket, examining it more closely in the dappled light of the clearing. The etched door seemed more detailed now, and he could make out a small symbol above it that looked like a stylized mountain. "Who are you?" he asked, looking up from the stone to the woman's serene face. "And what is this place?" "I am Elindra, keeper of the silver tree and guardian of crossroads," she replied. "As for this place," she gestured to the magnificent tree behind her, "this is the heart of Whisperwood, a nexus where paths from many realms converge. Those who find their way here are always those who stand at the threshold of significant change." Berry looked around the clearing with new eyes, noticing now what he had missed before, the subtle shimmer in the air in certain spots, as though the boundary between this place and somewhere else was thin and permeable. "Are there other worlds beyond this one?" he asked, his voice hushed with wonder. "There are as many worlds as there are stars in the night sky," Elindra confirmed. "Some very different from your own, others so similar you might walk in them for days before noticing the differences." She gestured toward his guide stone. "That stone will not lead you to another world, but to another place within this one, a place where your spirit might find the belonging it seeks." Berry closed his fingers around the stone, feeling its reassuring warmth. "What should I do? Just keep following where it leads?" "For now, yes," Elindra said. "But first, you should rest. The journey from Hushwater Dell has taken more of your energy than you realize, and the path ahead requires strength and clarity." She rose gracefully to her feet. "Come, I will show you where you can sleep safely tonight." Berry stood, suddenly aware of a bone-deep weariness that had crept up on him unnoticed. Following Elindra, he approached the massive silver tree. As they drew near, he saw that there was an opening in the trunk, a perfectly hobbit-sized archway that led into a hollow within. The inside of the tree was surprisingly spacious and filled with a soft, silvery light that seemed to emanate from the wood itself. The floor was covered with a carpet of moss, so thick and soft it felt like the finest mattress when Berry lowered himself onto it at Elindra's invitation. The air inside was pleasantly cool and carried a subtle scent that reminded him of rain and moonlight, if such things had sense. "Rest now," Elindra said, her voice already seeming to come from a great distance as heaviness settled into Berry's limbs. "When you wake, the next phase of your journey will begin." As sleep claimed him, Berry had just enough consciousness left to place the guide stone carefully beside him on the moss. His last thought before drifting off was of the red door from his vision, and for the first time in his life, the persistent whisper of something missing was quiet, replaced by a gentle hum of anticipation. Berry's sleep was deep and dreamless, a perfect rest that restored both body and spirit. When he awoke, sunlight was streaming through the tree hollow entrance, creating patterns of light and shadow on the moss beside him. For a moment, he was disoriented, expecting to see the familiar ceiling of his hobbit hole. Then memory returned, bringing with it a surge of excitement for the journey ahead. Sitting up, Berry noticed a small wooden tray beside him that hadn't been there when he fell asleep. On it was a simple meal: fresh bread, a honeycomb, berries that glistened like jewels, and a wooden cup filled with a clear liquid that smelled of herbs and flowers. There was no sign of Elindra, but Berry had the distinct feeling he was not alone, that the tree itself was somehow conscious of his presence. After eating the delicious meal and drinking the refreshing beverage, Barry felt energized and clear-headed in a way he rarely experienced. Colors seemed sharper, sounds more distinct, and his body felt lighter, as though gravity had less hold on him. Here in the heart of the Whisperwood, he picked up the guide stone, which seemed warmer and somehow heavier than the day before, as though it had gathered energy during the night. The moment his fingers closed around it, he felt that gentle directional pull again, stronger now and more insistent. It was time to continue his journey. Stepping out of the tree hollow, Barry found the clearing empty, but no less magical in the morning light. The silver leaves of the great tree sparkled with dew, creating a canopy of twinkling lights above. He took a moment to perform his breathing ritual, centering himself for whatever lay ahead. Following the pull of the stone, Barry took a path leading away from the clearing that he was certain hadn't been there the previous day. This new trail was pleasant and easy to follow, winding through the forest in a way that revealed new vistas of beauty at every turn. He passed streams where water flowed uphill, defying the laws of nature as he understood them. He saw flowers that opened and closed in response to his footsteps, and glimpsed small, quick creatures with too many legs and iridescent scales, watching him from behind trees. The forest gradually changed around him. The trees became more widely spaced, and their character shifted from the ancient giants of the deep wood to younger, more varied growth. The undergrowth grew thicker, but remained easy to navigate, as though the plants themselves moved aside to create a path for him. By midday, Barry noticed the forest thinning further, giving way to a landscape of rolling hills covered in tall grass that rippled in the breeze like water. In the distance, perhaps a half-day's walk away, he could see mountains rising against the horizon, their peaks crystalline in the clear air. The guide stone pulled him toward these mountains, and as Barry emerged fully from the forest onto the grasslands, he felt a shift in the air, a freshness that spoke of higher elevations and open spaces. The sun was warm overhead, but a cool breeze kept the temperature pleasant as he began making his way through the waist-high grass. Walking through the grasslands was a sensory delight. The grasses brushed against his hands and body with a silky touch, releasing a sweet, clean scent with each disturbance. Insects hummed and buzzed all around, creating a constant background melody that rose and fell with the breeze. The ground beneath his feet had a springy quality, cushioning each step and making his journey easier than expected. As the afternoon wore on, Barry began to notice stones emerging from the grass around him. Not natural formations, but clearly arranged by intelligent hands. These stones were carved with spiral patterns and symbols that reminded him of the writing in his parents' storybook. Some stood alone, while others formed circles or lined up in patterns that suggested purpose beyond decoration. Barry's curiosity drew him to examine one of the larger stone circles. As he stepped into the center, he felt a distinct change in the air, a stillness and clarity that hadn't been present outside the circle. The constant background sounds of the grasslands seemed muted here, replaced by a gentle humming that seemed to come from the stones themselves. Placing his hand on one of the stones, Barry was surprised to feel a vibration, a subtle pulse like a heartbeat. The surface was warm despite the cooling evening air, and the spiral pattern carved into it seemed to shift slightly under his touch, though when he looked directly at it, all appeared static. "They remember," said a voice behind him. Barry turned, quickly to find a figure standing at the edge of the stone circle. A man not much taller than himself, but more slender, with features that suggested both youth and great age simultaneously. His skin was the warm brown of well-polished wood, and his eyes were a startling amber that caught the late afternoon sunlight. He wore simple clothing of undyed linen, adorned only with a belt of intricately woven grass, from which hung various small tools and pouches. "Remember what?" Berry asked, recovering from his surprise. "The old ones who walked these hills before time was measured as it is now," the stranger replied, stepping into the circle. Up close, Berry could see that what he had taken for unusual freckles on the man's face were actually tiny patterns, like those on the stones, seeming to shift and move beneath the skin. They left these circles as anchors and reminders, though few now remember what they were meant to remind us of. "Are you the one who maintains them?" Berry asked, gesturing to the clearly deliberate arrangement. The man smiled, a warm expression that transformed his ageless face into something more definitively youthful. "I am a steward of the stones, yes. One of several who walk these grasslands." He studied Berry with open curiosity. "But you are not from these parts, a hobbit from the western valleys by your appearance, though there is something different about you." His amber gaze fell to the stone in Berry's hand. "Ah, a seeker with a guide stone. That explains much." "My name is Berry," he offered, extending his free hand in greeting. "And I am Thorn," the man replied, taking Berry's hand in a firm grip. "Where does your stone lead you, Berry of the western valleys?" Berry gestured toward the distant mountains. "That way, though to what exactly, I'm not yet sure." He hesitated, then added, "I saw a vision of a red door in a hillside. My stone seems to be leading me toward it." Thorn's expression grew thoughtful. "A red door. There are settlements in the foothills where such dwellings exist. People there live much, as your kind do, in homes carved into hillsides, though they are not hobbits." He released Berry's hand and pointed to a particular peak among the mountains, one that seemed to catch the light differently than the others, glinting like metal in certain angles. "You'll want to head toward the Copper Peak. The valley beneath it holds the settlement of Emberdale. If a red door awaits you anywhere in these parts, it would be there." Berry peered at the indicated mountain, trying to fix its distinctive appearance in his memory. "How far is it? Can I reach it before nightfall?" Thorn laughed, a sound like small bells. "Even with the longest legs, that would be impossible. The mountains are further than they appear, and the foothills themselves take time to traverse." He gestured to the stone circle around them. "But you are welcome to rest here for the night. The circles offer protection and clarity to those who sleep within them. Many travelers seek them out for precisely this reason." As if to confirm Thorn's words, Berry noticed the quality of light changing as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grasslands and painting the sky in dramatic hues of orange and pink. The prospect of continuing his journey in darkness held little appeal, especially in this unfamiliar territory. "Thank you," Berry said, sincerely grateful for the offer. "I would appreciate that." Thorn nodded, pleased. "Then, let us prepare. Night falls quickly here, and the grasslands change their character with the setting sun." Together, they gathered dried grasses that Thorn showed Berry how to weave into a simple but comfortable sleeping mat. The steward produced fire from a pouch at his belt, not with flint and steel as Berry expected, but by whispering to a handful of special seeds that began to glow and then burst into gentle, smokeless flames when placed in a small depression at the circle's center. As darkness fell around them, the stone circle began to emit a subtle luminescence, each carved symbol glowing with a soft blue light that intensified as the night deepened. Beyond the circle, Berry could hear the grasslands coming alive with night sounds, different insects, the calls of nocturnal birds, and occasionally the soft padding of larger creatures moving through the grass. Thorn prepared a simple meal from his pouches: flatbread, dried fruits, and a tea brewed from grassland herbs that tasted of sunshine and wind. As they ate, Berry shared the story of his life in Hushwater Dell, his parents' mysterious origins, and the persistent feeling of something missing that had eventually led him to follow the feather into Whisperwood. In return, Thorn told tales of the grasslands and mountains, of the various peoples who dwelled there, of the ancient history written in stone circles and mountain caves, and of the subtle magics that flowed through these lands like invisible rivers, bringing strange phenomena and unexpected wonders to those attuned to their presence. The people of Emberdale, Thorn explained as the night grew deeper, are known as the Emberkin. They are craftspeople of exceptional skill, particularly in working with metals and stone. Their homes are indeed built into hillsides, with doors of various colors that, if the old stories are true, reflect the calling or nature of those who dwell within. And red doors? Berry asked, his interest piqued. What do they signify? Thorn's expression grew thoughtful. Red is the color of hearth and welcome, of blood and connection. Those with red doors are often healers or keepers of lineage and history. He studied Berry with renewed interest. You said your parents came from somewhere else before settling in your Hobbit village. Berry nodded. They never spoke much about their past, and they died when I was young. All I have is their book of unusual stories and the breathing ritual my mother taught me. This breathing ritual, Thorn said, sitting up straighter. Would you show me? Berry demonstrated the simple practice, standing still, eyes closed, taking 3 deep, intentional breaths while focusing on the present moment. When he finished, Thorn was looking at him with an expression of profound realization. That is not just any breathing ritual, Berry Bramblewood. That is the centering breath of the Emberkin, taught to their children from the earliest age. He leaned forward, his amber eyes reflecting the blue glow of the stones around them. I believe your parents may have come from Emberdale, and your guide stone is leading you back to your ancestral home. The revelation hit Berry like a physical force, sending a shiver of recognition through his entire body. Suddenly, many things made sense. His parents' mysterious background, his own sense of not quite belonging among the hobbits, the persistent feeling that something was missing. Could it be that his true home had been waiting for him all this time? A place where others practiced the same rituals and perhaps saw the world as he did. But I'm a hobbit, Berry said, confused yet excited. And you said the Emberkin are not hobbits. The Emberkin are similar in stature to hobbits, but with some differences, Thorn explained. They lack the characteristic furry feet, for one thing. But there have been marriages between the peoples over the centuries. You may be of mixed heritage, which would explain much about your appearance and your spirit's calling. Berry sat back, absorbing this possibility. It was both overwhelming and profoundly right, like finding a word on the tip of your tongue that you've been searching for all day. "Tomorrow," he said with newfound determination, "I need to reach Emberdale." "And so you shall," Thorn assured him. "I will guide you to the edge of the foothills. From there, the path to Emberdale is well marked, and your stone will lead you the rest of the way." With this plan settled, and with more to think about than he had ever imagined, Barry stretched out on his woven grass mat. The stone circle's soft glow created a peaceful atmosphere, and the gentle crackle of the seed fire provided a comforting soundtrack. Despite the excitement of the day's revelations, the deep weariness of travel soon pulled him towards sleep. As consciousness began to fade, Barry clutched his guidestone, feeling its reassuring warmth against his palm. Tomorrow would bring him closer to the red door of his vision, to the possibility of answers about his parents, and perhaps to a home where the persistent whisper of something missing would finally be silenced. His dreams that night were vivid and coherent in a way dreams rarely are. He saw his parents, younger than he had ever known them, standing before a red door set into a hillside. They looked happy, but also sad, as though leaving a beloved home. In his dream, Barry tried to call out to them to ask why they had left, but no sound came, just as the door began to open, revealing what lay beyond. The dream shifted, and Barry found himself looking at his own reflection in a still pool of water, but with subtle differences. His eyes more amber than hazel, his hair a shade darker, his features somehow more defined and purposeful. He woke with the first light of dawn, these dream images still vivid in his mind. The stone circle was quiet now, its blue glow faded with the night. Thorn was already awake, dismantling their small camp and returning the grassland to its natural state. After a quick breakfast of leftover flatbread and fresh water from Thorn's seemingly bottomless pouches, they set off toward the mountains. The guidestone's pull was stronger than ever, creating an almost physical tug that Barry could feel through his entire body, as though invisible threads connected his heart directly to whatever waited at their destination. The grasslands in morning light presented a different kind of beauty than they had the previous day. Dew clung to every blade and seed head, transforming the ordinary landscape into a glittering wonderland. Small creatures darted away from their footsteps, some recognizable as rabbits or ground birds, others more unusual with extra limbs or iridescent fur. The air was cool and fresh, carrying scents of earth and growing things, with occasional sweet notes that Thorn identified as coming from rare flowering shrubs hidden among the taller grasses. As they walked, Thorn shared more about the Emberkin and their culture. They were indeed craftspeople of renowned skill, but their true gift lay in their connection to memory, both personal and collective. It was said that an Emberkin could touch an object and read its history, or visit a place and see events that had transpired there generations ago. "The centering breath your mother taught you," Thorn explained as they navigated around a particularly large stone circle, "is the first step in accessing this gift. It grounds you in the present moment, while simultaneously opening awareness to other times and possibilities." "I've never experienced anything like that," Barry admitted. "For me, it's always just been a moment of peace and presence." Thorn nodded thoughtfully. "The gift often requires activation through formal rituals or prolonged practice, Or perhaps it simply hasn't been called forth by necessity yet. He glanced at Berry with a knowing expression. Gifts have a way of revealing themselves when most needed. As the day progressed, the landscape gradually changed. The grass became shorter, and the ground began to rise in gentle slopes. There were the first intimations of the foothills. Stone outcroppings appeared more frequently, and the soil beneath their feet changed from rich black earth to a reddish clay that stained the edges of Berry's feet. By midday, they had reached a clear boundary where the grasslands ended and the foothills properly began. A well-worn path wound its way upward from this point, switchbacking to accommodate the increasingly steep terrain. From their vantage point, Berry could see multiple valleys nestled among the foothills, each with its own character, some densely wooded, others open and meadow-like. Thorn pointed to a particular valley, still distant, but now clearly visible. There lies Emberdale. You can just make out the settlement. See those darker spots along the valley walls? Those are the entrances to the Emberkin homes. Berry strained his eyes, and indeed, he could see what Thorn described. A series of dark dots arranged in tiers along the sloping sides of a verdant valley. From this distance, it was impossible to discern colors or details, but the sight nonetheless sent a thrill of anticipation through him. "This is where I leave you," Thorn said, gesturing to the path. "My duties keep me to the grasslands, but your way forward is clear. Follow this path until it forks near the large standing stone you can see up ahead. Take the right fork, which will lead you directly to Emberdale." Berry turned to the steward, feeling a rush of gratitude for his guidance and companionship. "Thank you, Thorn. I wouldn't have understood the significance of what I seek without your knowledge." Thorn smiled, placing a hand on Berry's shoulder. "Sometimes the greatest service we can offer is simply to help others interpret what they already know in their hearts. Your guide stone would have led you to Emberdale regardless, but perhaps now you journey with greater purpose and understanding." They parted with a final handshake, and Berry began his ascent into the foothills. The path, though steep in places, was well maintained and clearly designed for travelers of various sizes. Stone steps appeared where the incline was particularly challenging, and flat resting places had been built at regular intervals, often with simple stone benches and sometimes small shelters for protection from sudden weather. As he climbed higher, Berry noticed how the air changed, becoming clearer, somehow sharper in his lungs, carrying the scent of pine and stone dust. The vegetation changed too, transitioning from grasses to hardy mountain shrubs, and eventually to scattered pines and other evergreens that clung to the rocky soil with determined root systems. The guidestone's pull remained steady, confirming he was on the right path. Its warmth had increased, sometimes becoming almost hot in his hand, then cooling slightly, as though communicating in a code of temperature variations that Berry couldn't quite decipher, but somehow understood was positive. At the fork Thorn had mentioned, marked by a tall standing stone, carved with spiraling patterns, similar to those in the grassland circles, Berry paused to rest and eat a small portion of the provisions Thorn had given him before they parted. Sitting on a conveniently placed stone bench, Berry looked out over the vista below him, the vast grasslands stretching to the horizon in one direction, the complex terrain of foothills and mountains in others. From this elevation, he could see patterns in the landscape that weren't visible at ground level. The way streams cut through the terrain, following invisible underground structures. how vegetation clustered in seemingly random patterns that, from above, resembled glyphs or symbols. It was as though the entire landscape were a message written in a language he had not yet learned to read. After his brief rest, Berry took the right fork as instructed. This path was narrower, but even better maintained, with carefully placed stepping stones through wet areas and thoughtfully constructed switchbacks that made the increasingly steep terrain manageable. The sun was beginning its westward descent, casting long shadows and gilding the landscape in warm light that emphasized textures and contours. As the afternoon waned, Berry finally crested a ridge and found himself looking down into Emberdale proper. The valley was even more beautiful up close, a lush, sheltered paradise nestled among protective hills. A clear stream ran down its center, widening in places to form small pools before continuing its journey. The hillsides were terraced for gardens and orchards, creating a stepped effect that was both practical and aesthetically pleasing. And there, built into those hillsides, were the homes of the Emberkin. Each dwelling had a round door set into the earth, reminiscent of Hobbit holes, but with the subtle differences in design and ornamentation. From this distance, Berry could now see that the doors were indeed painted different colors: blues, greens, yellows, and yes, scattered among them, the warm hue of red doors. The guide stone in his hand had grown so warm it was almost uncomfortable to hold, and its pull had become an insistent tugging that drew him down the path toward the valley floor. As he descended, Berry became aware of movement in the valley, small figures working in the terraced gardens. Others gathered near what appeared to be a central square, children playing near the stream. By the time Berry reached the valley floor, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across Emberdale and illuminating the western-facing doors with golden light. People had begun to notice him, stopping their activities to watch his approach, with expressions of curiosity rather than alarm. Up close, Berry could see that Thorn had been right about the similarities and differences between hobbits and Emberkin. They were of similar height, but the Emberkin were slightly more slender in build, with hair that tended toward darker shades, and eyes in unusual colors: amber, violet, and deep green predominating. As Berry approached the central square, an older man stepped forward from the gathered crowd. He had a trim white beard and amber eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He wore simple but finely made clothing in earthy tones, with intricate embroidery along the hems and sleeves. "Welcome, traveler," the man said, his voice warm and resonant. "I am Aldrin, Elder of Emberdale. What brings you to our valley as day turns to evening?" Berry felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of his travel-worn appearance and the many eyes upon him, but the guidestone pulsed reassuringly in his hand, and he took a deep breath, centering himself before responding. "My name is Berry Bramblewood," he began, surprised at how steady his voice sounded. "I've come from Hushwater Dell, far to the west beyond the Whisperwood Forest." He hesitated, then decided direct honesty was best. "I believe my parents may have come from this place before I was born. I'm seeking understanding, I suppose, and perhaps a red door I saw in a vision." A murmur went through the gathered Emberkin at his words. Aldrin's expression shifted from polite welcome to intense interest. "Show me what guides you," he said, his gaze dropping to Berry's closed fist. Berry opened his hand, revealing the guide stone with its etched door and mountain symbol. The stone glowed faintly in the fading light, pulsing like a tiny heartbeat. Aldrin drew in a sharp breath. "The Bramblewood stone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, then louder. "It has been returned to us after all these years." He looked at Berry with new eyes, studying his features intently. "You have your mother's eyes and your father's chin. You were but a baby when they left, too young to remember." Berry felt his heart racing. "You knew my parents. They were from here." Aldrin nodded, his expression softening. "Rowan and Iris Bramblewood were born and raised in Emberdale. Your father was one of our finest metalsmiths, and your mother, a gifted healer. Their departure was unexpected and much mourned." He gestured for Berry to follow. "Come, there is much to tell you, but first, let us see where your stone guides you. I have my suspicions, but the stone knows best." As they walked through the settlement, Berry was aware of many curious eyes following their progress. Some of the Emberkins smiled and nodded in greeting, while others whispered among themselves. Children, less reserved than their elders, sometimes darted close to get a better look at him before being called back by watchful parents. The guidestone's pull led them up one of the terraced paths to a section of hillside where the dwellings were spaced further apart, each with its own small garden and sitting area outside. As they climbed, the stone grew warmer and more insistent in its tugging, until finally it pulled Berry to a stop before a dwelling with a round door painted a deep, warm red. The door and the hillside around it looked well maintained, but had an air of patient waiting, as though the home had been tended but not inhabited for many years. Flowering vines grew along the edges of the entryway, and stone lanterns flanked the door, currently unlit, but ready to welcome someone home. "I thought as much," Aldrin said quietly, watching Berry's reaction. "This was your parents' home. It has been kept ready all these years in hope of their return, or perhaps yours." Berry stared at the red door, his vision blurring slightly with unexpected tears. This was it, the door from his vision, the destination his guidestone had been leading him toward all along. Standing before it, he felt a profound sense of rightness, as though pieces of himself that had been scattered were finally coming back together. "Why did they leave?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Aldrin sighed, his expression growing somber. "Those were troubled times. There were those from beyond our lands who sought the Emberkin for our gifts, not always with good intentions. Your parents left to protect you and themselves after certain events made them fear for your safety." He placed a gentle hand on Berry's shoulder. "The full story is not mine to tell, but inside you may find some answers. The dwelling of an Emberkin holds the memories of those who lived there. If you've inherited the gift, you may be able to access them." Berry looked at the door, then back at Aldrin. "How do I?" "The stone is both key and catalyst," Aldrin explained. "Place it in the depression at the center of the door. See there? Then perform the centering breath your mother surely taught you, and touch the door with both hands. What happens next depends on your connection to the dwelling and to your heritage." Heart-pounding, Berry approached the door. Now that he stood directly before it, he could see the depression Aldrin mentioned, a circular indentation at the exact center of the door, precisely the size of his guidestone. The stone itself seemed almost eager, vibrating slightly in his hand as he raised it to the door. With a deep breath to steady himself, Berry placed the stone in the depression. It fit perfectly, and as it settled into place, lines of soft light spread outward from it, following patterns in the wood that had been invisible before. The light traced an intricate design across the entire door, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Standing straight, Berry closed his eyes and performed the centering breath as his mother had taught him. One breath to acknowledge the past, another to be present in the now, a third to open to what might come. Then, opening his eyes, he placed both palms flat against the glowing door. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a rush of impressions, emotions, and fragmented images flooding his consciousness. He saw his parents, younger than he remembered them, laughing in the kitchen beyond this door. He felt their love for each other, and for the tiny baby he recognized as himself. He experienced their fear and grief when they decided to leave, their determination to protect him at all costs. Most powerfully, he felt their connection to this place, to Emberdale, to this dwelling with its red door, to the community of Emberkin. This had been their home in the deepest sense, the place where they belonged, where their gifts were understood and valued, and it was meant to be his home too. As the flood of impressions gradually subsided, Berry became aware that the door was swinging open, though he had not pushed it. Warm light spilled out from within, illuminating the deepening twilight outside. The air that wafted from the doorway carried scents of herbs, metal, and something indefinably comforting. The scent of home. "Welcome back, Berry Bramblewood," Aldrin said softly behind him. "You have found your way home at last." With a heart full of emotion and a mind buzzing with new understanding, Berry stepped through the red door of his vision, crossing the threshold into his true home, the place where the persistent whisper of something missing finally fell silent, replaced by a deep sense of belonging and rightness that resonated through his entire being. Inside, the dwelling was both strange and familiar. Strange because he had never consciously been here before. Familiar because some part of him recognized it on a level deeper than memory. The main room was circular with a domed ceiling from which hung a wrought iron chandelier of intricate design. A fireplace dominated one wall, with comfortable seating arranged around it. Shelves lined another wall, filled with books, small sculptures, and curious instruments whose purpose he could not immediately discern. Doorways led to other rooms, a kitchen visible through one, sleeping quarters through another. Everything was scaled perfectly for someone of Hobbit or Emberkin height, creating an immediate sense of physical comfort and belonging. The furnishings were simple but beautifully crafted, with an emphasis on natural materials and organic forms. But what struck Berry most was the feeling of the place, a sense of welcome so profound it was almost tangible, as though the dwelling itself recognized and embraced him. The persistent whisper that had been his lifelong companion was completely silent now, replaced by a feeling of such rightness and completion that he found himself sinking onto a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the emotion of it all. Aldrin remained respectfully by the doorway, allowing Berry this moment of homecoming. "The dwelling remembers you," he said quietly, "and you remember it, though you were too young to form conscious memories when you left. This connection is the essence of being Emberkin, this ability to connect with places and objects across time." Berry looked up, tears streaming freely down his face now. "I never understood what I was missing," he managed to say. "All my life, there was this feeling, this whisper. And now, it's quiet. Now I know. You have found what your spirit has been seeking," Aldrin said, nodding with understanding. "Rest now in the home of your ancestors. Tomorrow, when you are rested, there will be time for more stories, for meeting those who knew your parents, for learning about your heritage and the gifts that are your birthright." He gestured to a small metal bell hanging near the door. "Ring this if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll return in the morning." With a respectful nod, Aldrin departed, closing the red door gently behind him, and leaving Berry alone in the dwelling that was now his. For a long while, Berry simply sat, absorbing the feeling of completeness that had replaced his lifelong sense of something missing. Then, gradually, curiosity drew him to explore the home he had inherited. In the kitchen, he found shelves of dried herbs, many familiar from his own garden in Hushwater Dell, others strange to him in what appeared to be his father's workshop. Metalworking tools were arranged with care, and half-finished projects waited as though their creator had just stepped away for a moment, rather than decades ago. In what must have been his parents' bedroom, Berry found clothes still hanging in a wardrobe, personal items arranged on a dresser, and a book similar to the one he had inherited lying on a bedside table. Opening it, he found it was a continuation of the stories in his own book, more tales of distant lands and remarkable journeys. But it was in a smaller room that Berry made the most emotional discovery. This room had clearly been prepared for a child. For him, a small bed with a colorful quilt, toys carved with remarkable skill, and on the wall, a map painted in vibrant colors showing Emberdale at its center, with the surrounding lands stretching outward in all directions. Hushwater Dell was there, far to the west, marked with a small blue door. His parents had never intended their departure to be permanent. They had prepared this room in hope of return, in anticipation of raising their son in their true home when it was safe to do so. Whatever had driven them away must have been serious, indeed, and yet they had managed to preserve some essence of their heritage in the simple home they made in Hushwater Dell, in the breathing ritual passed to their son, in the book of stories that was not merely entertainment, but a connection to a broader world, in the subtle differences that had always made Berry feel slightly apart from his Hobbit neighbors, exhausted from the emotional journey as much as the physical one. Berry eventually made his way back to the main room. The guidestone still rested in the center of the red door, glowing softly, but Berry found he didn't need to retrieve it. Its purpose had been fulfilled. It had brought him home. As night fully claimed Emberdale, Berry settled into a comfortable chair before the fireplace, with a thought that seemed to come from somewhere beyond his conscious mind. He reached out and touched a particular stone in the fireplace's construction. Immediately, flames sprang to life, bringing warmth and flickering light to the room. This simple magic, so natural it barely seemed like magic at all, felt like the first step into his inheritance, the beginning of understanding what it meant to be Emberkin. Outside, stars appeared in the clear mountain sky, the same stars he had watched from his garden in Hushwater Dell, but somehow different now, brighter perhaps, or more meaningful in this place where he truly belonged. The sounds of night in Emberdale filtered through the slightly open window, the gentle babble of the stream, distant conversation and laughter from other dwellings, the soft hooting of mountain owls. As weariness claimed him, Berry didn't fight it. Here, in this place of belonging, sleep felt not like an interruption of living, but a natural part of it, a chance for his mind and spirit to integrate the profound changes this journey had brought. His last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude to the mysterious feather that had first led him from his garden, to Elindra and Thorn who had guided his way, to the stone that had brought him home, and to his parents, who despite their departure had somehow planted the seeds that would eventually lead their son back to his true heritage. The persistent whisper of something missing was silent at last, replaced by a deep, abiding peace that carried Berry into the most restful sleep of his life. In this peaceful dwelling with its welcoming red door, Berry finds the deepest rest he has known. The bed cradles him perfectly, the quilt a comforting weight that seems to adjust itself to his needs throughout the night. The air that circulates through the slightly open window carries the scent of night-blooming flowers and the gentle music of the stream outside. His dreams are vivid yet peaceful. He sees his parents in this very home, going about their daily lives. He sees himself as a baby, cradled in his mother's arms, as she sings a lullaby whose melody seems familiar, though he cannot recall ever hearing it before. He sees his father working metal by firelight, creating beautiful objects that seem to glow with more than just reflected flame. These are not merely dreams, but memories accessed through the deep connection between dwelling and inhabitant, between Berry and his true heritage. When morning comes, Berry wakes with unprecedented clarity and calm. The persistent question that had followed him throughout his life has been answered. The whisper of something missing has been silenced. In its place is a profound sense of belonging, of being exactly where he is meant to be. Sunlight streams through the eastern window, painting patterns on the floor that seem somehow meaningful, like a language written in light. The dwelling feels alive around him, responsive to his presence in subtle ways. The temperature just right. The sounds from outside muted to a pleasant background murmur, the very air seeming to welcome his each breath. Berry rises and performs his morning breathing ritual, the centering breath of the emberkin, and finds it has new depth and meaning here. Each breath connects him more deeply to this place, to this moment, to his heritage. The 3 breaths become a conversation between his being and the dwelling, between his present and his ancestry, between what he has been and what he might become. During his first day in Emberdale, Aldrin returns as promised, bringing with him others who knew Berry's parents, an elderly woman who was his mother's mentor in healing, a middle-aged man who apprenticed under his father in metalworking, children who would have been his playmates had circumstances been different. Each brings stories and memories, filling in the outline of who Rowan and Iris Bramblewood were, helping Berry understand the people beyond the parents he had known. He learns that the trouble that drove his parents away was indeed serious. A group from distant lands had discovered the memory-reading abilities of the Emberkin and sought to exploit them for purposes of power and control. Berry's parents, particularly gifted even among their kind, had been specific targets. Their departure had been a last resort, a painful choice made to protect their infant son and to prevent their abilities from being misused. The danger has long since passed. The group disbanded, their leaders no longer living. Had Rowan and Iris known, they might have returned to Emberdale with their son. Why they did not seek information about their former home remains a mystery, one that Berry may never fully solve. Perhaps they feared drawing attention back to themselves Or perhaps they found enough contentment in their new life that the pain of remembering what they had left behind was too great to risk. Whatever their reasons, Barry finds he cannot fault them. They created a safe, loving home for him in Hushwater Dell. They preserved enough of their heritage to plant the seeds that would eventually guide him back, and they left him the breathing ritual that was both practical tool and cultural touchstone, a daily practice that kept him connected to his true nature, even when he didn't understand its significance. As the days pass, Barry begins to explore his inherited gifts more fully. Under the guidance of Aldrin and others, he learns to expand the centering breath into deeper practices that allow him to connect with objects and places on a profound level. Accessing their histories and meanings, he discovers that his lifelong habit of noticing small details others missed was not merely a personality quirk, but the first stirrings of his Emberkin abilities. He learns that the red doors in Emberdale do indeed signify keepers of history and lineage, as Thorne had said. Those who dwell behind red doors are charged with preserving and interpreting the collective memory of the Emberkin, a responsibility Barry now inherits along with his parents' dwelling. The skills that had set him apart in Hushwater Dell, his drawing, his attention to natural cycles, his ability to find the perfect herbs for any ailment, all take on new meaning and purpose here. What were once merely personal tendencies become valued contributions to the community. The very qualities that had sometimes made him feel like an outsider among hobbits make him unmistakably Emberkin. Yet Barry doesn't abandon his hobbit upbringing either. He introduces elements of hobbit cooking to his new neighbors, shares hobbit songs and stories, and brings a hobbit's practical approach to certain problems. His dual heritage becomes not a source of confusion, but a unique strength, allowing him to bridge perspectives and traditions in ways that enrich both himself and his new community. In time, Barry undertakes a journey back to Hushwater Dell, not to return permanently, but to properly say goodbye to the place that sheltered him for so many years, to collect the few possessions that still hold meaning for him, and to share with curious hobbit neighbors the truth of where he has gone. Some are skeptical, others envious, but all seem to recognize that Barry has found where he truly belongs. And when he returns to Emberdale, coming once more to the red door that now unquestionably signals home, Barry feels the rightness of it all. The journey that began with a feather's flight has led him through forest and grassland, across mountains, and through time itself, back to the place his spirit had been seeking all along. The whisper of something missing will never return, for Berry Bramblewood has found his true home, not just a dwelling with a red door, but a community that understands him, a heritage that explains him, and a purpose that fulfills him. His search has ended, but a new journey has just begun. We return now to the gentle valley of Emberdale, where Berry Bramblewood has found his true home, behind the red door of his parents' dwelling. The persistent whisper that followed him throughout his life has been silenced, replaced by a deep sense of belonging and purpose. In the soft light of evening, Barry sits in the garden outside his red door, watching as stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars that shone above Hushwater Dell now shine above Emberdale, connecting the separate parts of his journey into one coherent whole. The air is cool and clear, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers and the gentle music of the stream that runs through the heart of the valley. Nearby lanterns cast pools of warm light, illuminating the pathways between dwellings without disturbing the beauty of the gathering night. Berry's body feels heavy and comfortable, settled into perfect alignment with this place. Each breath comes easily, naturally deepening as relaxation spreads through his muscles. His hands rest loosely in his lap, neither grasping nor seeking, simply being. His eyes grow heavier as he watches the stars, his awareness drifting between precise observation and dreamy contemplation. The red door behind him stands partly open, warm light spilling out to embrace him like a blanket of radiance. From within comes the subtle scent of herbs hanging to dry, of well-oiled wood, of the lingering aroma of the simple dinner he prepared earlier. These scents blend with the outdoor fragrances to create a perfect symphony for his senses, familiar and new simultaneously. As night deepens, Berry's awareness expands to include the entire valley, the other dwellings with their colorful doors, the terraced gardens now silvered by moonlight, the distant peaks still catching the last reflected glow of the departed sun. He feels connected to it all, not separate, but an integral part of this landscape and community. His breathing grows slower, deeper, each exhale releasing him more completely into this perfect moment of belonging. The weight of his body seems both substantial and insubstantial simultaneously, grounded yet somehow lighter than before. His heartbeat slows to match the gentle rhythm of the stream, his thoughts quieting to occasional ripples across the still pond of awareness. The quest for home has many forms throughout our lives. Sometimes we seek physical shelter, sometimes emotional safety, sometimes purpose and meaning. Berry's journey reminds us that home, in its truest sense, is that place or state where we can be most authentically ourselves, where our gifts are recognized and valued, where we belong simply by virtue of being who we are. In finding his way to Emberdale, Berry discovered not just his ancestry, but his future, a community where his unique perspective is valued, where his natural tendencies make sense in a broader context, where the very qualities that once set him apart now mark him as belonging. The journey itself was necessary, each step, each encounter, each moment of beauty or challenge, contributing to his readiness to truly recognize home when he found it, without following the feather into Whisperwood, without meeting Elindra at the heart of the forest, without crossing the grasslands with Thorn. Berry might never have understood the significance of the Red Door or been prepared to embrace his heritage. So too in our own lives. The path that seems to wander may actually be the most direct route to where we need to be. What appears as delay or detour often provides exactly the experience or insight required for the next stage of our journey. The persistent whisper of something missing, rather than a burden, can be a guide leading us toward greater wholeness and belonging. As you rest now, allowing yourself to drift deeper into comfort and relaxation, consider that your own journey unfolds with similar perfection. Each experience, each relationship, each moment of joy or challenge contributes to your unique path and the place of belonging that calls to you. Whether physical location, state of being, or some combination of both, remains patient, ready to welcome you when the time is right. Let your body grow even heavier, sinking more deeply into support. Let your breath find its own natural rhythm, slow and deep and nourishing. Let your mind drift like clouds across a vast sky, neither grasping nor rejecting any thought or image that passes through your awareness. Like Berry in his garden beneath the stars, You are exactly where you need to be in this moment, perfect in your becoming, complete in your essence, supported on your unique journey. With each breath, you can release a little more effort, surrender a little more tension, and settle more deeply into trust and peace. As Berry drifts toward sleep in his new yet ancient home, we too can release into restfulness, allowing the journey to continue in its own perfect way. In its own perfect time, Berry settles deeper into his chair as twilight embraces Emberdale. The red door of his dwelling glows warmly in the last light of day, its color deepening to the rich hue of autumn leaves. He feels a profound peace flowing through him, replacing the lifelong whisper of something missing with the quiet certainty of belonging. The valley grows quiet as lamps are lit in dwellings throughout the settlement. Golden light spills from round doors of various colors, creating a constellation of warmth against the darkening hillsides. The stream continues its gentle song, a constant melody beneath the softening sounds of day's end. Berry's breathing slows, deepens. Each inhale brings the mingled sense of home. Herbs hanging to dry inside his dwelling, night-blooming flowers in the garden, the clean mountain air with its hint of pine. Each exhale releases any remaining tension, any lingering doubt. His body feels pleasantly heavy, supported perfectly by the chair that seems to know exactly how to hold him. His muscles relax one by one, from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. The weight of his arms and legs increases as he surrenders more completely to this moment of perfect belonging. The stars emerge one by one, pinpricks of diamond light in the deepening blue of the sky. Berry watches them through increasingly heavy eyelids, recognizing the same patterns he observed from his garden in Hushwater Dell. The same stars that watched over his journey now witness his homecoming, constant companions connecting past, present, and future. His thoughts grow quieter, moving like slow clouds across a vast sky. Images from his journey drift through his mind. The iridescent feather that first led him from his garden, the pool of echoes in the heart of Whisperwood, the stone circles in the grasslands, the red door of his vision that became reality. Each memory comes without urgency or attachment, simply floating through his awareness before gently dissolving. The breathing ritual his mother taught him, now understood as the centering breath of the Emberkin, happens almost automatically. One breath acknowledges the journey that brought him here. Another breath affirms his presence in this perfect moment. A third breath opens to the belonging that will continue to deepen with each passing day. Berry's awareness expands to include the entire valley, feeling the gentle pulse of life around him. Other Emberkins settling into evening routines, small creatures finding shelter for the night, plants turning inward as daylight fades. He senses not just the physical reality, but the tapestry of connections, the web of relationships that make Emberdale not just a settlement, but a living community. His consciousness begins to drift, floating between wakefulness and sleep. In this liminal space, the boundaries between self and surroundings soften. Berry feels held, not just by the chair, but by the dwelling itself, by the hillside cradling the dwelling, by the valley embracing the hillside, by the mountains protecting the valley. Layers of belonging, circles within circles, all perfectly aligned in this moment of homecoming. As sleep gently claims him, Berry's last awareness is of complete rightness, of being exactly where he is meant to be, of a journey completed and a new journey beginning. of the silent whisper finally answered by the eloquent peace of home. Take another deep breath in, feeling the cool air flowing into your lungs, bringing refreshment and renewal. As you exhale, allow your body to settle even more heavily into comfort and support. Feel how each breath deepens your relaxation, carries you further into peaceful rest. Like Berry in his dwelling with the red door, you can allow yourself to be perfectly supported, perfectly held. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go, nothing to figure out or solve, just this moment of complete acceptance and rest. Notice how your breathing has naturally slowed, finding its own perfect rhythm. Each inhale brings nourishment. Each exhale releases anything that doesn't serve your deep rest. This natural cycle continues without effort, your body knowing exactly how to sustain itself while you drift deeper into relaxation. The weight of your body increases with each passing moment. Your legs feel heavy and warm, your arms loose and comfortable. The small muscles of your face relax, softening around your eyes, your jaw releasing any hidden tension. Even your scalp relaxes, creating a pleasant tingling sensation that flows downward like gentle rain. Any thoughts that arise come and go like clouds across a vast sky, neither held nor rejected. They appear, drift through your awareness, and dissolve, leaving the sky of your mind increasingly clear and peaceful. You might notice sounds in your environment, perhaps distant voices or music, the hum of familiar household systems, the natural sounds of night. These sounds can simply be part of the tapestry of this moment, requiring no response, creating a gentle backdrop for your deepening rest. Like Berry discovering the true meaning of home, you might find that rest has its own wisdom, its own intelligence. Your conscious mind can step back, allowing deeper aspects of yourself to restore and replenish in their own perfect way. Your breath slowing, deepening, your body heavy, comfortable, your mind quiet, peaceful, drifting now, floating on an ocean of perfect support, carried by gentle currents toward the shores of sleep. Each wave brings you closer to that restful shore. Each breath deepens your surrender to this natural journey. Following Berry's path to restful sleep, you can trust in the process that carries you there. No effort required, no path to figure out, simply allowing, accepting, receiving the gift of deep and healing rest. Safe, supported, at peace, drifting, floating, letting go, home, in this moment, completely at rest. Berry Bramblewood found his true home behind the red dogger in Emberdale. You find your home in this moment of perfect peace, this state of complete acceptance and rest, dwelling in the house of deep relaxation, where each breath is a homecoming, each heartbeat a confirmation of belonging. Let go completely now, surrendering to sleep, to restoration, to the deep wisdom of rest that knows exactly what you need. The journey continues in dreams, in the quiet work of renewal that happens beyond conscious awareness. Rest, sleep, renew, peace, comfort, home, letting go, letting go, letting go. In the deep stillness of Emberdale, Berry sleeps peacefully in his ancestral home, the red door standing guard over his rest. Similarly, you can release completely into the deep stillness of sleep, held perfectly in the safety of this moment, drifting deeper, softer, quieter. Rest now, rest completely. Rest in peace. In the quietness of night, Berry sleeps peacefully behind his red door in Emberdale. The dwelling holds him in perfect comfort, the red door standing sentinel, the valley cradling everything in its gentle embrace. The persistent whisper that once accompanied his every moment has been replaced by a profound silence. Not the emptiness of absence, but the fullness of completion. As we return to this scene of perfect restfulness, visualize once more the cozy dwelling built into the hillside, its red door slightly ajar, soft light spilling out to meet the silver glow of moonlight. Inside, Berry rests deeply, his breathing slow and even, his body completely surrendered to the support beneath him, his mind quiet in the certainty of belonging. The red door itself, symbol of his journey's completion, threshold between seeking and finding, glows with a subtle warmth even in darkness. Its color speaks of hearth and home, of blood and lineage, of the connections that sustain us beyond conscious awareness. Feel yourself present in this peaceful scene. Perhaps you stand in the moonlit garden, witnessing Berry's rest from a respectful distance. Perhaps you too sit in a comfortable chair within the dwelling, sharing the profound silence of arrival and completion. Or perhaps you merge with Berry's experience itself, feeling directly the deep peace that comes when the search for home concludes in perfect belonging. However you find yourself in this scene, allow the peace of it to permeate your awareness. Let the quietness of Emberdale at night become your quietness. Let the gentle rhythm of sleeping breath become your rhythm. Let the certainty of having arrived become your certainty. Your body grows heavier with each passing moment, releasing more completely into support. Your breathing slows naturally, finding the perfect pace for deep restoration. Your mind quiets, thoughts becoming distant and dreamlike, consciousness floating free from its usual anchors. In this state of profound relaxation, the boundary between visualization and experience softens. The peace of Berry's homecoming becomes your peace. The silence that replaced his persistent whisper creates space for your own deepest rest. Like the red door standing partly open, allow yourself to be partly open to the approaching realm of sleep, not forcing, not resisting, simply allowing the natural transition to unfold in its own perfect timing. Each breath carries you closer to that threshold. Each moment of surrender prepares you for crossing over. Remember how Berry followed the feather into Whisperwood, how he trusted the guidestone across the grasslands, how he recognized the red door as his destination. Similarly, you can follow your breath into deeper relaxation. Trust the heaviness of your body as it guides you downward. Recognize the approaching threshold of sleep as your perfect destination. The journey itself varies across the physical landscape, yours across the landscape of consciousness, unfolds with its own intelligence. No effort required. No path to figure out or force, simply allowing, accepting, receiving what each moment brings. As Berry surrendered to the rightness of his arrival in Emberdale, surrender now to the rightness of approaching sleep. As the red door welcomed him home, let the doorway to sleep welcome you into perfect rest. Each breath now becomes slower, deeper. Each moment carries you further into peace. Each heartbeat confirms you're exactly where you need to be. Drifting now between wakefulness and sleep, floating in that liminal space where conscious control softens and deeper wisdom takes over. Like Berry in those moments before sleep claimed him completely, you hover at the threshold, perfectly poised between effort and surrender, between doing and being. And now, just as Berry finally released into complete rest, you too can let go entirely. Cross the threshold into sleep. Allow consciousness to dissolve into the deeper currents of restoration and renewal. No more words needed, no more guidance necessary. Just pure experience, pure being, pure rest. Sleep, sleep, sleep. Peace, peace, peace. Home, home, home. In the first phase of our wind down, let us return once more to Berry's dwelling in Emberdale, with its welcoming red door and peaceful atmosphere. Inside, Berry sleeps deeply, having found the home his heart sought for so long. The dwelling holds him in perfect comfort, each room maintaining the ideal temperature, each surface offering the exact support his body needs. The subtle magic of the Emberkin home responds to him even in sleep, adjusting to his needs without conscious direction. Outside, moonlight bathes the valley in silver radiance, creating a landscape of gentle shadows and luminous highlights. The stream continues its quiet song, a constant lullaby beneath the deeper silence of night. Occasionally, a nightbird calls softly from the forest edge, its voice a brief reminder of the living world that continues its rhythms through darkness. The red door stands partly open, neither fully closed against the world, nor completely open to it. A perfect balance of protection and connection. Through this opening, the mingled scents of night-blooming flowers and herb-scented air create a constantly changing tapestry for the sleeping senses. Your own body grows heavier with each moment spent in this peaceful scene. Your breathing deepens naturally, finding a rhythm that perfectly supports deep relaxation. Your mind quiets, thoughts becoming fewer and more distant, like stars appearing in the vastness of night sky. Like Berry's journey following the feather, the guide stone, and finally arriving at the red door, your consciousness follows a natural path toward sleep. Each breath is a step on this journey. Each moment of surrender brings you closer to your destination. Remember how Berry felt when he first placed his hands on the red door. That rush of recognition, that sense of completion, that silent answer to the whisper that had followed him throughout his life. Your approach to sleep can hold that same quality of homecoming, of arrival at the perfect destination. Breathe deeply now, inhaling peace, exhaling any remaining tension. Feel the weight of your body, heavy and comfortable, perfectly supported. Allow your mind to drift, thoughts becoming distant and dreamless. The red door of Berry's dwelling, the perfect symbol of his homecoming, invites you to cross your own threshold into perfect rest. No effort required, no path to figure out or force, simply allowing the natural transition to unfold in its own beautiful timing. Each breath now becomes slower, deeper. Each moment carries you further into peace. Each heartbeat confirms you are exactly where you need to be. In the second phase of our wind down, we focus on the breath, that constant companion that connects conscious and unconscious, waking and sleeping, effort and surrender. In his dwelling behind the red door, Berry's breathing has found its perfect sleeping rhythm, slow, deep, and utterly relaxed. Each inhale brings nourishment without conscious thought. Each exhale releases him more completely into restorative rest. The centering breath his mother taught him, now understood as his cultural birthright, continues to serve him even in sleep. Though no longer a conscious practice, its essence remains. One breath connecting him to his journey, another affirming his present belonging, a third opening to whatever renewal sleep might bring. Your own breathing can guide you similarly toward perfect rest. Without forcing or controlling, simply notice the natural rhythm that has already established itself. Perhaps your inhales have lengthened, your exhales softened. Perhaps pauses have developed between breaths, little islands of perfect stillness. Each breath carries you deeper into relaxation, closer to the threshold of sleep. Like Berry following the guide stone across the grasslands, you can follow your breath across the landscape of consciousness, trusting its innate wisdom to lead you where you need to go. Inhale, receiving the gift of oxygen, nourishment for every cell. Exhale, releasing carbon dioxide, letting go of what no longer serves. Inhale, feeling the subtle expansion of your chest and abdomen. Exhale, experiencing the gentle contraction, the surrender of muscles. The air you breathe connects you to the world around you, just as Berry's dwelling connected him to the hillside, the valley, the mountains beyond. Each breath is a reminder that you are part of something larger, held within systems of support that continue without conscious control. As Berry trusted the guidestone's warmth and directional pull, trust now the warmth spreading through your body with each breath, the downward pull of deepening relaxation. Your breath knows the way to sleep, has traveled this path countless times before, breathing in, breathing out, receiving, releasing, floating, drifting. Let your breath become increasingly subtle, requiring less effort, creating less disturbance. Like Berry's final moments before sleep claimed him in his new home, your conscious control gradually dissolves, replaced by the deeper wisdom of your autonomic systems. Each breath now becomes softer, quieter. Each moment carries you further into stillness. Each heartbeat confirms your perfect surrender. In the third phase of our wind down, we embrace the profound simplicity that comes as sleep approaches. Just as Berry's complex journey ultimately led to the simple rightness of belonging, your path to rest culminates in elemental experiences beyond elaborate thought. In his dwelling behind the red door, Berry has released all complexity. His body rests in perfect heaviness. His breath flows in natural rhythm. His mind has surrendered its questioning to the deeper knowing of sleep. The persistent whisper that once complicated his days has been answered by the eloquent silence of homecoming. Similarly, you can release all complexity now. No problems to solve, no questions to answer, no journeys to plan. Just the simple experience of being, of resting, of allowing sleep to approach in its own perfect timing. You are safe. You are supported. You can rest completely, like Berry discovering that home was waiting for him all along. You may discover that sleep has been waiting patiently, requiring only your willingness to surrender, to trust, to let go of conscious control. Your body knows how to sleep. Your mind knows how to quiet. Your breath knows how to guide you. The red door that welcomed Berry home now stands as a symbol of the threshold between wakefulness and sleep. Not a barrier to be forced, but a passage to be gently crossed when the moment is right. Rest is your birthright. Peace is your natural state. Sleep is your perfect destination. As Berry found home in the dwelling his parents had prepared for him long ago, you find rest in the biological patterns established through your entire existence. No effort required, no special skill needed, simply allowing what already knows how to happen. Heavy, comfortable, at peace, drifting, floating, letting go. Sleep, sleep, sleep. In our final phase of wind down, words become fewer, spaces between thoughts longer. Like Berry in his deepest sleep behind the red door, you approach the realm where language dissolves into pure experience, where consciousness merges with deeper currents of being, safe, supported, letting go, home, rest, peace, sleep. Thank you for joining this journey to restful sleep. Like Berry Bramblewood, may you find the home your heart seeks, the peace your spirit craves, the rest your body deserves. Good night.